US President Joe Biden's popularity is at rock bottom. And what do I mean by that? Well, it is sunk so low that we could practically say that it is sinking into the deepest pits of the electoral ocean. Pay close attention to the data. As of mid-July 2022, some polls suggested that 71% of voters did not want him to run again, including 54% of Democrats. That later percentage rises to 94% among young Democrats between the ages of 18 and 29. That's a whopping 94%.
President Biden is facing a disaster with young voters, increasing fears among Democrats that they are in danger of losing a generation if he doesn't improve his standing with Generation Z.
And that, believe it or not, is not all. If we take an average of the polls, we can see that the president's approval rating keeps on falling. As you can see, since he took office in just a year and a half, his approval rating has dropped 20 points. 20 points! That's crazy. Okay, so how is this possible? And what could explain such a debacle in the president's rating? Well, let's get back to Biden. To be fair, since the chaotic, undignified, and disastrous way in which he withdrew from Afghanistan took place, something that we here on VisualPolitik are strongly critical of, we have to acknowledge that the team formed by President Biden, Secretary of State Antony Blinken, and Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin has reaped quite a few foreign policy goals. And I don't just mean small ones either. For example, these three characters are leading US and Western support for Ukraine in a war that has completely derailed the Kremlin's plans and shattered much of Russia's military capability. They have also been able to consolidate and bring together both NATO and the Atlantic relationship. In fact, under Biden, Washington has once again become a leader in Europe, and today, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization seems stronger than ever. And it's not just Europe, it is a very similar story in Asia. The current administration's policy has far exceeded China's ambitions to take control of regional dominance. For example, there are the cases of the AUKUS program that seeks to make sure Australia is a superpower, or the strengthening relations with Japan and South Korea, the latter being given, by the way, full freedom for the development of ballistic missiles. We could also mention the reaffirmed defense of Taiwan, the improvement of bilateral relations between the US allies in the area, the strengthening of the Quad, and the new Indo-Pacific economic framework. We discussed all this in a past video here on VisualPolitik. The Biden administration's activity in the Pacific is becoming almost as frenetic as it is in Europe. But even in the Middle East, where Biden's relations with the Saudi government are frankly bad, his administration is supporting the creation of a kind of new military alliance that includes not only several Arab countries, but also the state of Israel. In other words, we are talking about a strengthening of the presence, influence, and relations of the United States that we have not seen for decades. However, hold on a minute there, because despite all this, Biden's popularity is still colder than an ice floe in the middle of Antarctica. And the big question is, how on earth is this possible? What on earth could explain why the president's popularity has plummeted in such a way? Well, VisualPolitik fans, the answer may have to do with the constant gaffes, like when he said he had cancer and the White House had to deny it.
The first frost, you know what was happening. You had to put on your windshield wipers to get literally the oil slick off the window. That's why I and so damn many other people I grew up have cancer.
Or maybe it has to do directly with the fact that it is more evident than ever that the president is old, very old. Among other things, this makes him totally clueless when it comes to promoting his achievements. But I honestly believe it also has to do with this. That's right, we are talking about what we could describe as the great failure of bidenomics. Because, VisualPolitik fans, when Joe Biden won the election, he not only promised institutional regeneration, he also promised a 180-degree turnaround in economic policy so the federal government would once again lead the rebuilding of the United States of America. Some even described Biden's arrival as ushering in a new economic paradigm that would put an end, once and for all, to Ronald Reagan's low-tax, small-state, deregulation-based America. And don't think that it was just something exogenous. Biden's own entourage argued that his coming to power would lead something practically equivalent to Roosevelt's New Deal after the Great Depression of 1929. And so, during the election campaign, Biden spoke of things such as recovering the influence of labor unions, fighting resolutely against climate change, cancelling student debt, sorting out the migratory chaos, and rebuilding old American infrastructure. And above all, he spoke a lot about stimulating investment, private investment, and above all, leading the new economy. Public investment. So in a way, we could say, paradigm shift or not, what Joe Biden was clearly promising was to rebuild America with a very democratic agenda. However, since then, the results have not exactly been as expected. In some cases because the projects have stalled or come to almost nothing. And in others, Because, well, I think the headlines speak for themselves.
US inflation reached a new 40-year high in June of 9.1%. The numbers show the US economy is at least teetering on a recession.
But where exactly has bidenomics failed? What is not working with the current White House policy? What is causing Americans to emphatically want to dump the current president? Well, let's find out. But before we do, and before we go any further, we have some very, very special news to tell you. VisualPolitik fans, our community is expanding in all directions. In just a few days, we'll have a new channel to add to the family, Visual Economic, a brand new channel conceived with the aim of better understanding how the world of economics works. Have you heard of perpetual debt? What problem does the electricity network have? Can money be created without generating inflation? What would happen if all the banks went bankrupt all at once? Well, you can now subscribe and click on the little bell to be notified when our first video comes out. We can't wait for you to join us and see what you think. For now, the first question is over to you. If Hawaiian shirts are distinctively VisualPolitik, what will be the characteristic look of the new channel? Any ideas? Place your bets. We'll leave you the link here and also in the description. We hope you like the new channel, and above all, we're looking forward to your comments on our fantastic outfits. And now, let's get cracking.
A revolution at half throttle.
The Biden presidency began with a flurry of activity, but by the end of the first half of 2022, this administration had basically accomplished only three things with its new economic policy. A plan to fight COVID somewhat smaller than Trump's, and which became the real fuel for inflation. An increase through presidential orders and directives in government spending over the next decade of $530 billion. An increase primarily to improve the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, a voucher plan for low-income families. And finally, a bipartisan infrastructure project much smaller than promised. Then, it has to be said, in late July 2022, the Biden administration won surprise votes to push through the so-called Inflation Reduction Act, a bill that includes several tax hikes, including a 15% minimum payment on profits and an unprecedented expansion of the tax collection system. Also, hundreds of billions of dollars in new spending. For example, $385 billion will be used to combat climate change, promote electric vehicles, and strengthen the production of clean energy. Still, the bill is only a fraction of the administration's initial promise, and virtually all other Bidenomics policies have run aground. And given the president's extremely low popularity and the Republicans' improved prospects with voters, it doesn't look like this revolution without gas can go much further, either with the current administration or an upcoming one. So let's see who dares to catch such a knife falling into the void. Of course, this is not to say that Biden's presidency is over, far from it. The international situation has put foreign policy in the spotlight, and, as we've already mentioned, the Biden administration is doing anything but standing still. However, as far as economic policy is concerned, failure seems more than likely. And to top it off, the worst phase of the president's popularity may just be beginning.
Most investors, economists, see Fed rate hikes causing a recession within 1 year, CNBC survey shows.
But apart from what he has failed to make happen, the question we're all wondering is, where exactly has Joe Biden gone wrong? Check this out.
What America didn't need.
VisualPolitik fans, basically, the president and his team misdiagnosed the situation of the US economy, and from then on, everything went from bad to worse. One example is Biden's pandemic crash plan, which poured tens and hundreds of billions into the US economy, which was already recovering much faster than expected. The result? Gasoline under the influence of galloping inflation. And that's not all. For example, within the above plan was a virtually universal cash tax credit of up to $300 per month per child, depending on the case. This was an initiative that the Biden administration thought would be welcomed with open arms by the US citizenry, which would allow them to consolidate it permanently. Well, nothing could be further from the truth. Barely a third of Americans support making this policy permanent, which of course allowed Republicans to decide that they would not vote for its renewal beyond the first year.
1 in 3 want expanded child tax credits to be made permanent. Poll.
Think about it. Why support the government permanently handing out cash checks in a context where there is plenty of available work and increasing wages? Be that as it may, what is clear is that one of the star measures of this administration failed to win general support. But what it did do was cost a lot of money, increase public debt, and further fuel inflation. Then, along the same lines, the diagnosis that poorer America was falling behind and therefore needed the government to boost new jobs was simply not true. In fact, since 2010, it's been precisely the lowest wage brackets that have been growing the most. So it's a case of more effort, more money, and new regulations thrown down the drain. And then we have taxes. The obsession of this administration has been to raise taxes on business, and supposedly on the wealthiest. The problem is that, for example, the corporate income tax hikes from 21% to 28% advocated by Joe Biden would not only return the United States to having one of the highest tax rates in the developed world, but also would contribute to slowing down business investment, slowing down the economy, and increasing production costs. Exactly what not to do in times of inflation. top it all off, another thing that the Democrats did not take into account is that in recent years, the percentage of families who have their savings and pension plans invested in the stock market has risen again. Families who, naturally, are not amused by measures such as this one.
Gallup finds 58% of Americans reporting that they own stock, based on its April economy and personal finance survey. This is slightly higher than the 56% measured in 2021 and 55% measured in 2020.
In short, Biden has pushed an economic policy based on large public spending plans and tax increases that society did not need, that society did not want, and that was not even desirable given the economic context. A policy that, in addition, has ended up driving the highest inflation of the last 40 years. This has forced the Federal Reserve to react, which in turn looks set to end with the US economy going into recession, the government squandering hundreds of billions of dollars, and families losing purchasing power. It couldn't have gone worse, at least from the point of view of the popularity of bidenomics. And wait just a minute, because we're actually not done yet. Another major change promised by the Biden administration had to do with the energy transition and the fight against climate change. Something that, to tell the truth, even with the data in hand, how can I put it, doesn't exactly generate much enthusiasm among the American public, particularly at times like this. Take a look.
Only 1% of voters cited climate change as the most important issue facing the country, far behind concerns about inflation and the economy. Even among voters under 30, the group thought to be most motivated by the issue, that figure was 3%. David Wallace Wells, NYT columnist.
Be that as it may, the point is that Biden's team put the oil industry firmly in its sights. As soon as they arrived at the White House, the president began issuing executive orders against the oil industry one after another. And so, among other measures, President Biden halted drilling in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge, cancelled construction of the Keystone X pipeline with Canada, ordered government agencies to study new rules to curb consumption, freeze permits, raise taxes, and reduce funding for oil companies, and even placed a moratorium on leasing federal lands to search for and drill for oil. All of these measures not only sought to punish the US oil industry, but above all, send a very clear message to the market that it was not worth investing large amounts of money in the oil sector because the government was going to punish it and hopefully save the planet. In this light, it was kind of a big mistake though. All these policies we have seen led to increasing demand and at the same time damaging supply just when the economy was recovering at full speed. It is possible that without Biden's actions things might not have been much different, or maybe they would. What is clear that Bidenomics has gone in the wrong direction and that it has become one of the major culprits of the economic imbalances that are punishing American families today. Because Biden could indeed do many things. Check this out.
What America does need.
If Biden wanted to improve the standard of living for American families, his priority should have been to take measures to promote investment, both public and private. In the case of public investment, as we have told you in our Patreon bulletin, the problem is that the federal government spends more and more but invests less and less. In other words, the vast majority of the entire budget goes to welfare or non-productive spending. And so, instead of investing in research or infrastructure, such as interstate highways or the Hoover Dam, spending has largely shifted to social welfare, defense, and debt service. If we add defense spending and payments to individuals, salaries, subsidies, and income of all kinds, then we can account for 85.4% of federal spending, compared to 71.2% in 1990. This means that despite large public deficits, spending on other items such as infrastructure, space exploration, and R&D is being crushed. In other words, public investment is becoming smaller and smaller as a proportion of GDP. And to top it all off, net investment by US companies has also been falling for almost 40 years. Check this out. Attempting to change this trend with supply-side policies would have made a decisive contribution to curbing inflation and improving the purchasing power of American families in the long run. But within Bidenomics, all of this was the smallest part. In short, yes, unemployment is almost at its lowest level since 1969, but employment rates, which are recovering much more slowly, are not. And that's without mentioning that due to the massive inflation, real wages are contracting, which explains why consumer sentiment is almost as low as it was during the Great Crisis of 2008. Check this out. So, what does this mean? Well, that today, and perhaps without much reason, US consumers are pessimistic about the near future. And that is largely because they understand that Bidenomics hasn't worked at all. Let's just say that it doesn't matter that the fundamentals of the US economy appear robust. Biden came in with a plan that has done nothing but make things worse. And this is one of the reasons for Joe Biden's low popularity. So no matter that his administration is scoring big on foreign policy, the economic outlook does not change. The Biden presidency will not go down in history as a popular one. But, having said that, what is your opinion of Bidenomics? Do you think the current administration has time to change gear and achieve better results? Do you think that public opinion is being excessively unfair to the Biden administration? Leave us your comments below and let's open a debate. And of course, if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to all of us here at VisualPolitik. I hope you enjoyed the video, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.